Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. Well, it's no secret we've been paying a lot of attention to the recent air disasters and hearing even more about these near misses. Someone who has been talking about these near misses for a long time and how to prevent tragedies like the ones that we've seen recently is, of all people, a law professor, a somewhat legendary law professor. John Banzhaf is a professor of public interest law emeritus at George Washington University Law School. He's also an alumnus of MIT, knows a thing or two about engineering, and even more than engineering or the law, he's a guy that takes a look at problems and finds an out-of-the-box solution in terms of how to deal with them. And he's also one of my favorite guests just because he sounds so good. John, it's great to have you back on the program.
Well, I'm very happy to be there. I'm glad we're focusing not just on this one accident here at Washington, but rather what the FAA calls runway incursions, which are very close calls. We had almost 1,700 of them in 2023. And when you talk about the ones which are even closer, what the FAA calls skin to skin, you get almost one of those every day. The New York Times tells us that most of them are kept secret, and that same article interviewed air traffic controllers, and this is what they said. It's a quote. Close calls were happening so frequently that they feared it was only a matter of time until a deadly crash occurred. That's what happened.
And just for my edification and the edification of our audience, have these near misses always been a problem, or has this gotten significantly worse in recent years?
It seems to have gotten significantly worse recently. It's hard to say why. One, of course, is that there's more traffic. Obviously, if you go back 20 years, you have more traffic you had less traffic with jets than that we do now. Also, they're trying to get more people in, more planes in, and more planes out more quickly, which means that they're closer together, and they have new techniques which they think makes it safer to get them closer together, but it doesn't always work, obviously.
You've been a proponent for the use of AI to help avoid collisions and near collisions like this. Explain to folks how that would work.
Sure. AI is very sophisticated programs which learn from the past, and they can do things from our point of view almost infinitely faster. So, for example, the night that tragedy occurred, we had one person on duty there. He was doing the job of two different people. An AI program, just listening to air traffic, could monitor for the dozens of different frequencies. We have commercial, we have helicopter, we have small craft, we have military, we have home security. They could also simultaneously monitor all the radar, not only at Reagan Airport, but right across the river you have Bolling Air Force Base. 10 or 15 miles away you have Dulles Air Force Base. Pentagon has its own radar. The White House has its own radar. No human being could possibly keep all those together, and yet an AI program with a decent computer could calculate all of the various flight paths from all of this information in milliseconds, and if it sees a possible collision coming up, it could alert the controller so the controller would know there's a problem and take appropriate action.
I want to come back to the potential hazards of AI and some of the concerns that people have about AI in a second. But there are a lot of folks that say that the simple solution to the problem, like what we saw in Washington, D.C., is just to have more staffing in air traffic control towers and things of that nature. Would more staffing be a sufficient solution in your view?
Well, let me put it this way. I think history indicates that in all of the crashes which have occurred both here and abroad, there is usually not just one cause, because systems are supposed to have a backup or a margin. In this case, we had a number of things. We had an overworked controller doing two jobs. We had a chopper flying too high. We had an unclear tower instruction. He said, "Do you see the plane?" instead of "plane at your 12 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And Reagan is the most contested and probably the most difficult airport in the United States to land on. So more controllers would help, but it takes time to get them in. It gets time to train them. And once again, even one person can't monitor 5 different frequencies. He can't monitor radar from 2 and 3 and 4 different locations. And even when he's doing that, he has to think. It takes time. Think if you're driving down the road on your car at 60 miles an hour, suddenly you see something up ahead of yourself, and you got to react. You're going to hit the brake, you're going to turn to the side. You're only going 60 miles an hour. These planes are going, even in landing, they're going over 200 miles an hour, which means hundreds of feet per second. Now, I want a computer there because it can think in milliseconds. Mm-hmm. Persons can only think in terms of a second. It could take you a second, even if you're a good driver and you're alert, to make that decision when you see something ahead of you.
Going back to the issue of concerns that people have about AI, when I have used large language model AI programs like ChatGPT just for fun or to goof around or to do some stuff on the radio, I have noticed mistakes. They call them hallucinations. They make mistakes. There are these glitches. What happens if there's one of these AI programs that's tasked with collision avoidance and there's a glitch when it comes to avoiding a collision? Is that something that you're concerned about?
I think not, for 2 reasons. First of all, you're talking about programs which are very general. You can ask it any question in the world about any field, from astronomy to zoology. And sure, they're still developing them. They're not perfect. That's why also these self-drive cars every once in a while have a collision. But for airport traffic, very simple. You only use maybe 500 words together. You only have maybe a dozen or 2 dozen planes coming in at any given time. So it's not half as complicated, not 1/10 time as complicated as what we already have these AI programs doing, and they occasionally make mistakes. The second point, though, is the AI program would not do anything other than alert the controller on its radar screen or a speaker to say, beep, beep, warning, blah, 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 blah. Uh-huh. The controller would make the final decision. If he said, "Oh, I agree, this problem," okay, dive, go climb, turn left, turn right, whatever. But if the controller doesn't see a problem, he cannot listen to the controller, to the AI program, and they'll go back in and fix it. So I think it's not really a problem here. It is a problem when you have cars driving with all different kinds of things which can happen, or what you're describing where you can ask a computer any question in the whole world in probably 10 different languages. This is much simpler.
At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. We're talking with distinguished law professor emeritus at George Washington University Law School, John Banzhaf. John, one of the things that you alluded to when discussing the Washington, D.C. disaster was the issue that there's probably more than one thing that went wrong here. Have you had an opportunity to look at the Philadelphia situation and what may have went wrong there?
No, I haven't, but it does bring up another issue which I think is closely related, because in the Philly case, they were concerned that they might not be able to get those black boxes. They had to dig down. They were afraid they might be broken. Even in the Reagan airline case, question of could you get the black boxes out? They had to wait 3 or 4 days before they got the black boxes out. What most people don't realize is today black boxes should be obsolete. Frank, I can go in the middle of the forest where there is no cell phone. I can use my cell phone, my cheap little cell phone, which I keep in my pocket, and I can call on satellites, and I can send text messages to my friends all around the world. Now, if I can do that from my little cell phone, which does dozens of other things, you could have airlines have transmitters which transmit all of the information which is now stored in black boxes to satellites where it would be stored until the aircraft lands and then everything is over. And then you wouldn't have to worry about black boxes. You wouldn't have to worry about the delay in getting to them. Some, of course, are never found. The Malaysian Airlines, we never got the black boxes there. And in fact, this would also give you instantaneous location information if an airline like the Malaysian thing did crash. They might be able to send rescue people there in time to pick up, in the Malaysian case, probably people floating on the surface. Why do we rely on black boxes? That's back in the days when we didn't have centralized storage, these thumb drives. We didn't have these satellites. We can not replace black boxes, but supplement them. You'd have instantaneous information. You wouldn't wait 3 days. You wouldn't be diving down under the ocean looking for these things. We can have lots of improvements simply by using not futuristic technology, not something I'm hoping or dreaming or saying I might one day devise, but things which you can literally buy off a shelf today.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
This episode is brought to you by GMC. When you have 4 new tires, every drive feels fresh. Right now, buy 3 select tires and get 1 for just $1 during the GMC Certified Service Fresh Start Tire Event. Visit gmc.com/service offers or see dealer for full details. At participating U.S. GM dealers only. Highest or equal value tire will be $1. Offer ends 5/31/2025. Not available with other offers.
Anyone can follow. It takes something special to be an original, which is why the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV arrives with new ways of surrounding you in luxury, including the ultra-wide 48-inch panoramic display and the multi-sensory Lincoln Rejuvenate experience. A true original never stops evolving. So meet the 2025 Navigator, the original that's all new and better than ever. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Navigator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
Obviously, you have a pretty wide audience in terms of your commentary and people that read your legal analysis and all sorts of things. I can't be the first person that you've shared that idea with. Why hasn't at least some airline implemented an idea in line with what you're talking about to replace the black boxes?
I think it would require a coordinated effort between many airlines and the people who run the emergency satellites. But more broadly, the problem at National has been known for years. People are complaining for years that it is too busy, it is too difficult to land in. I don't know whether you know this, but the problem is when you're landing, you have to follow the snakes and turns of the river so you don't make too much noise when you're going over somebody's house. So it's the most difficult to get in. Then on top of that, they've got these helicopters going back and forth. People have been complaining for years, and nothing happens. Or let's take the investigators. The investigative organization can only make recommendations, and half of the recommendations based upon past actual incidents, actual crashes, which they have made, have not been implemented by the FAA, even though they're coming from a government organization and they're coming from people with 10 times more expertise than I have. You've got inertia. You've got all kinds of problems like that. You're dealing with the government. The FAA, for example, recently awarded $100 million to 12 airports just to reconfigure their taxiways, construct new taxiways, and install airfield lighting. We've got something called the Airport Surface Detection Equipment, ASDE, but we don't have it at half of the airports, including important ones like Santa Barbara, Austin, Saratoga, Burbank, where there have been many of these airport incursions. So I'm not at all surprised that people aren't running and jumping at my idea, but one of the great advantages of it is that you can test it for almost nothing. You go out and buy a desktop computer, you get AI software, you get somewhere where either directly from the air or over the internet you get the air traffic and listen to it, and you hook the air traffic speaker up to the AI, you run it for a month, and you see if it works. If it doesn't work, fine, we scrap it. We've wasted a couple of $1,000s. But if it does work, then you can improve on it. You can then add other things to make it better. You can add a map, for example, of the airport showing all the taxiways. You can monitor different radars. You can monitor different frequencies. You can use ground-based radar. You can use all of these other inputs. By this time, any human being would be totally overwhelmed, but the AI, it can eat and drink this stuff up in milliseconds.
If you're just tuning in, this is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. We're talking about the recent air disasters with John Banzhaf, the recent near misses, and more importantly, how to avoid things like that in the future. That certainly sounds like a great idea to me. I am where things go from here, given the prevalence of these near misses. Airline travel, as far as you're concerned, though, from a passenger perspective, is still relatively safe, right?
It is relatively safe statistically because you generally travel long distances. Yes, you're certainly safer if you want to go from New York to L.A. to fly than to try to drive your car. No question about that.
Let me pick your brain on a couple legal issues real quick. I think this is probably the first conversation we've had on the radio since the controversial pardons, first of President Biden pardoning everybody, even people that have not been charged, and then President Trump pardoning everybody that had anything to do with January 6th. What is your take on the pardons overall, both from a legal and a political point of view?
Well, let's start with the legal because that's where I have expertise. Almost certainly, presidents can pardon virtually anybody they want. That is one of the few powers which is virtually unlimited. It cannot be reviewed by a court. Probably a president could pardon only white people or only black people or only Republicans or only Democrats. I tend to think that in both of these cases they were somewhat abused. But like any other power that a president or anybody has, it can be abused. We don't want to take away his power to grant pardons because in many situations the pardons are important and serve a valuable public purpose. So I think it's like the Fourth Amendment. You tell a guy he doesn't have to speak to the police. He probably won't. Every once in a while, somebody gets off on a legal technicality, goes out and murders somebody, but nobody suggests that we ought to be able to go back to the good old days, if you can call them that, where the police could beat confessions out of people and they had to talk to the police.
In terms of one of the issues that has come up in the aftermath of the Biden pardon specifically is the issue of whether these people can no longer invoke their Fifth Amendment right to avoid answering questions before congressional committees. What's your read on that? If, say, the Republicans that control the House Judiciary Committee or any relevant investigatory body, could they issue a subpoena to Hunter Biden or Liz Cheney and compel them to answer questions without having them get the option of the Fifth Amendment?
Almost certainly, but it does appear, the law isn't completely clear on this, that while they are protected from forced self-incrimination in federal investigations, whether by the FBI or a congressional committee, that doesn't necessarily apply to state ones. So you could have a rabid Republican DA in one state or a rabid Democrat Republican in another state. They could bring some of these people in and subpoena them. Oh, and by the way, one hidden interesting area in this is, so far as the law says, you don't have to make the pardons public. They usually are. But for example, Biden could have written a pardon for himself. Joe Biden, not Hunter Biden, but Joe could have written a pardon for himself, kept it in a locked drawer, and if he's ever hauled in, he could then bring it out, and he's got a pardon. He can't be prosecuted, at least federally.
But as far as the Fifth Amendment claim in federal prosecutions goes, they wouldn't be able to claim that before Congress, as far as you could tell.
As far as I can tell, they would not, and a judge would compel them to testify. If they didn't testify, they would be held in contempt. They would be jailed for a reasonable period of time. But if they insisted for 6 months or a year or whatever not to talk, eventually there's not much you can do.
Very, very interesting, and we will certainly see where it goes. You know, yesterday I spent a little bit of time talking about that situation involving an attempted prosecution of a doctor who was prescribing abortion medication to someone in another state. I know you've written on that. What's your analysis of that prosecution?
The analysis is it is is a very serious and only one of various serious attacks which are being made against the right of abortion. When one state requests extradition from another state, in this case it would be, I guess, Louisiana requesting the extradition of this doctor in New York, the ability of the governor of New York to refuse is somewhat limited. You can't have one state saying, well, I don't like your prosecution down there. I don't like your laws. I don't think somebody ought to be prosecuted. And even if they don't get extradited, they might be arrested in some other state. And I can tell you, having gone through this with many other clients, anybody who is indicted, it is scary. You have to go out and hire a lawyer. It's very expensive. This hangs over your head for a long time. So many doctors in states like New York, which have laws, they have specific laws protecting doctors from who write prescriptions for people in the other state, even they are likely to be scared and deterred and stop writing these abortion pill prescriptions. And today, most of the abortions are occurred by prescription, not by surgical D&Es. So it is a serious risk. But in addition, they're bringing in suits allegedly on behalf of the fetus, a dead fetus, an alive fetus. They're charging people with literally homicide for prescribing pills or assisting somebody to get an abortion. And that could mean you tell a 17-year-old girl, here's where you can get an abortion, or I'll drive you to the airport. You can be charged in some places with homicide.
Lastly, sir, clearly you're very precise in the manner that you use language. I've used the term near miss several times when it comes to describing several of these almost collisions that have taken place when it comes to airplanes. A couple of folks when I have used the term near miss on air before say it's not a near miss, it's a near hit. How do you feel about that term near miss?
I think near hit would be a more precise one, but whether we call it a near miss or a near hit, I think the overriding problem is we've got almost 1,700 of them every year. We've got the skin-to-skin ones more than almost every day. We've got to do something. There probably is no one simple solution like hiring more controllers or just getting helicopters out of national airspace. There are a number of different approaches, but at very least we ought to at least try using AI. We can try it very inexpensively. We can find out within a month whether it works. And if it doesn't work, fine, we forget it, we go to something else. But if it works, then that's a cheap, simple solution you can put into effect within months, unlike these other things which take years to build runways and so on and so forth.
Do you have a favorite for the Super Bowl?
No.
Okay. All right. Asked and answered. Thank you. John Banzhaf, it is always a treat to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
If you want to comment on any portion of our conversation, you can give me a call, 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.